welcome again to book review of The Vampire. That's what I meant to say. Good evening, everyone, and welcome as well to my co-host, Leonora, the Lady Vampire.
Hello. How are
Hello.
you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm okay. Now
All right.
I am okay.
Okay, so Leonora has experienced some technical difficulties with getting on, but I'm trying to manually manage her microphone volume because she's having to use the native microphone to her laptop. So I will manage that as we go in case I need to adjust that any further. But either way, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome again to the show. This is the last episode covering the last part of the book, Interview with the Vampire. It may indeed not be the last episode of this series, but if it does continue, we'll be starting a new book the next time we do it. But before we get into the events of the last portion of the novel, who's joining us this evening? Oh, we have Keeverdam, Mike R., Noah Asensio, and speaking of Keeverdam, we pin the fundraisers to the top of the chat box. Thank you, Keeverdam. Adabisi is here, Jack Frost, Mike Savage, Nathan Willie, Spudgun, and I think that's everybody I see. If you're lurking, if you're in the future, good evening. So, Leonora, we have completed part 3 in the book, the second part of part 3, as well as the final part 4, and quite a bit different than the movie, I might say. And I was surprised at how different it was from the movie, all things considered.
Yeah, it's a totally different story.
Yeah, it really is. And in a way, I'm kind of glad it is the way it is, because first and foremost, of all the characters in the movie that I felt the worst for, the, I think, unnamed woman that is turned into a vampire to be Claudia's companion, basically is killed within 10 seconds after becoming a vampire in the movie.
Yeah.
Whereas in here, so what happened last time? We ended off with Louis all distraught and stumbling around in the dark at the prospect of having to leave Claudia or go off with Armand, and he gets gently kidnapped by an artist for a portrait he then steals after killing the artist. Very bizarre little detour. But anyway, that little adventure doesn't really have anything to do with anything. And then we move straight into the last act of the film, effectively, except Claudia has beckoned a woman who was alluded to before, a doll maker, where in the movie, I believe, where it is implied that Claudia finds a male doll maker and then kills him and then takes a brand new doll with her in sort of a little side montage scene, if I remember correctly. In this instance, we have she's actually named, it's Madeline, and Madeline makes dolls in the image of her now deceased daughter, and Claudia will be a child that will never die. And so Claudia brings her back, like in the movie, to the apartments, or their apartments in the hotel or whatever, and bids Louis embrace her and make her a vampire, which all plays out pretty much the same as in the film, as far as that goes, I think. And after that, I kept expecting, because I have the movie in my mind, I kept expecting, okay, so when do the other vampires break in and kidnap them all? And it doesn't happen. In fact, as far as I can tell, Madeline, Louis, and Claudia get some time together for around a week or so before anything else happens. And in the interim, Louis also has the opportunity to hang out with Armand in his secret hidey hole at the attic of some building in the middle of town somewhere, where they're all reminiscing and everything. So we get a lot more time with the character of Madeline and Claudia, and Louis sort of sitting in this nebulous zone of will I, won't I, leave Claudia and go off with Armand. Yeah, so that's my summary of the first part. Did you notice anything interesting out of it?
I think, like, until like this part, it still is kind of sort of like the movie, But then when we start like moving along, just to the end of this part 3, and obviously all part 4 is like completely different. Not necessarily in the general actions, but like on the little details that take us to those like big actions or big like highlights of the
Oh my gosh.
of the book. Yeah.
Lightning strikes in the background. This is perfect atmosphere.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I decided to bring some some special effects.
Well, I appreciate the production value. It makes the show so much more valuable that way.
Yeah. Even only if I were on time and not have any like issues with my microphone. But anyway,
4 minutes, 5 minutes late, whatever. It's no big deal. But yeah, the extra stuff in here gives us a bit more breathing room to take in all the events and the considerations than the movie does.
Yeah, we know a little bit more about Armand too. That is just like in the movies, just like oh, and there's this character called Armand, and he's intriguing, but that's it. It's like super quick how they just present it in the movie and just get rid of him, and it's, well, at least in the book, it's more important than what it is shown in the movie.
Yeah, it's also there's this constant. One of the lessons I've learned in life is that it is often the case that when someone says "I love you" to each other, if your definition of love is not the same one to another, you're both in trouble if you both think you're saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the idea of we're often told in the novel that Armand loves you or is in love with you, and you love him, and this, that, and the other. And it's not. At one point, it's even made explicitly clear that we're not talking romantic love. Really, we're not even talking necessarily intimate love. It seems to be more love of the idea, love of the. It seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong. It seems to me that the vampires in this story are in love with the idea of not being alone. That seems to be the biggest driving force at a certain point, is that Armand is so detached, and there's some lines in here that are similar to, but not exactly the same as in the movie, where Armand is like, Louis, I need you to help me make contact with this age because you represent the era and you're the, this, that, and the other. And I don't understand the world anymore. And I need somebody to explain all this stuff to me. And Louis like, I don't represent an age. I'm just a guy. Yes, but your story is representative of the whole age and everything else. Is like, I don't have a unique story to the age. What are you talking about? And it's like, and I think even the interviewer by the end of the book kind of says exactly what I'm thinking most of the time about these vampire characters, and also a theme that's in the role-playing game, is that they've lived so long as vampires, they've forgotten what being a human is. They forgot what being having mortal concerns are, because the finite nature of life is what drives us oftentimes to do the things that we do and take the risks that we take and enjoy the things that we enjoy. Once you remove that concern and you remove it for an extended period of time, I mean, Louis is going to fall into the same trap as Armand is at some point. There's just, it just seems inevitable. I mean, maybe he's some kind of emotional mutant where he's always going to be lamenting everything. And I suppose the way that he comes across in this book, maybe that's so. But yeah, if anything, Armand's love for Louis will be especially for a vampire, a relatively temporary fix. And obviously we see that by the time they depart ways at the end of the book. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So yeah, Madeline and Claudia, they're going to hang out, and Madeline's big plan is she wants to take Claudia and go off somewhere. And really, they should have left the night that Madeline was made into a vampire. They should have gotten out of there, because Armand's telling him the whole time, and it's told Louis, it's like, okay, the other group of vampires, they don't like Claudia's existence, and they're not going to put up with this Madeline as well. And you're in danger. I can protect you, but I can't protect them. They really should leave. And Louis didn't push them out because because of his indecisiveness of wanting to leave Claudia, he couldn't tell her to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so Madeline's big plan is Madeline's kind of got a little nuts becoming a vampire. She's got a little goofy on it. But the one weird advantage is that they describe this, and this is an interesting detail I wish they'd kept in the movie somehow. She started making Claudia-sized furniture because she's not only a doll maker, but also sort of like a miniature furniture craftsman as well. Mm-hmm. Starts making doll-sized furniture, Claudia-sized furniture, and Claudia-sized dresses and everything. And like Louis even says, like, looking at Claudia in this chair that was made for her, disproportionately, she almost looks like a full-grown adult.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of this illusion of, it's kind of weird because it's an illusion of trying to compensate for Claudia's inability to age, even though Madeline wants to be with Claudia because Claudia is a child that will never die. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. I could be.
No, I mean that definitely, I think it would be like a problem in the future. I mean, they died, but if they were like they successfully left Paris and like start living by themselves, I think that would be a problem because what Claudia wants the most is to be treated like a woman and not a child, and Madeline, what she wants is a child,
a doll,
a doll. So I think that would be like a problem, but I mean, they're dead, so
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's probably, honestly, given that dynamic, eventually Claudia would have felt suffocated. And Madeline would have been frustrated that she doesn't have a little girl, but instead has this cranky old woman, spinster, who looks like a little. Yeah, eventually they probably would have killed each other, or one or the other. Yeah. Claudia probably would have killed Madeline first, but the problem is that Claudia, if she had any sense, wouldn't be able to, because she's not strong enough to make another vampire, and she can't survive alone, so they'd be stuck together. It'd probably be sort of like another, I don't know, kind of Louis Claudia thing again, except that Madeline could conceivably abandon Claudia and Claudia would have no recourse.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, ultimately it's probably better that they died for their own good and well-being. But yeah, so Madeline has this idea that they're going to go burn down her doll shop to sort of separate and cut off her ties to mortal concerns and things, and really, cut the umbilical cord, so to speak. And so this is what's going on for about the week or so after Madeline is made, and there's all this delay time, and Armand's like, okay, just saying, they should probably leave. And then we start moving closely, or more closely, into what's going on in the movie. And I'm trying to remember, was it Louis gets captured and then he finds out Lestat is there, or is that before Lestat? Did Louis go visit the theater and see Lestat before the big kidnapping happened?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because there's a big surprise that Lestat suddenly appears. Now, this doesn't happen in the movie, of course. In the movie, Lestat, without any particular explanation as to how or why, travels all the way from New Orleans to San Francisco, just happens to be on the particular night that Louis is doing the interview. That I'll just say as an aside before we get to the end of the book, the end of the movie it was cool-ish, but it made absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. The ending of the book makes way more sense. It is way cooler as far as I'm concerned. I do not understand what Anne Rice was thinking. Granted that it was her version of the script that actually ended up in the movie, by setting the interview in San Francisco rather than in New Orleans, because it doesn't track how Lestat, who apparently is so antiquated and afraid of the modern day that he can't handle a spotlight from a helicopter without thinking it's the sun, makes his way all the way from Louisiana to San Francisco just to jump on a guy and then drive a car. He's still wearing his aged laced poofy shirt. Just doesn't. Anyway, but that's the movie. Anyway, so Lestat has suddenly appeared in the Theater des Vampires, and he's so happy to see Louis. Apparently, he obviously survived New Orleans in the fire, and eventually he made his way to Paris and sought out vampires and found out that Louis was there. And now he's seen Louis, and he wants Louis to come back with him. He needs Louis back. Everybody, there's something about Louis. That should be the title.
Everybody is in love with him.
Everybody loves Louis. Lestat loves Louis. Armand loves Louis. And Claudia loves Louis. And I think the artist loves Louis. And I think there's a Ratatouille in there that loves Louis. Yeah, But so Lestat shows up. But it's obvious that Lestat is, or at least the sense I got was that he was a relatively unwelcome guest at the theater. He wasn't in tight or friendly necessarily with the other vampires there, but it was obvious that they knew him, although we don't really get to find out what his past relationship was with either the Coven of Vampires or Armand in particular. Just that he's, I guess, shown up and on the manners of we are fellow vampires, can I see Louis? And Louis like, hi, Lestat. And it's like, Louis, come back with me. Where's Claudia? And it, again, maybe I'm interpreting things. It almost felt like maybe Lestat, between the time of the fire till now, had some kind of either change of heart or realization of his bad acts leading to this. I don't know if he was feeling guilty or simply just desperate because he was obsessed with Louis. It was hard for me to tell exactly what Lestat's motivation was, because on the surface it seemed like he's, he wants his ex back. But was that it? Was that a reason to travel across the planet?
Well, yeah, and I think it's part of the reason. The other reason is obviously he wants to, kill Claudia, because I don't remember the book just giving us the whole explanation, but he somehow he talks to Santiago and tells him everything, these two vampires, the little child and the other guy, they killed me, or they tried to kill me because they were mine, and that's part of the the reason that the group of vampires want to take revenge, because killing another vampire is forbidden. So I think that's part of how or why they have this, I don't know, try to work together or whatever, but I don't think they know each other previously, and I don't think that they were very happy to quote unquote work together, just because the vampire group doesn't like Claudia or Louis, and it's the perfect excuse, to do something mean to them, and Lestat is obviously getting his way with Louis, and getting avenged from Claudia. So
I assume that I'll just call them the Coven. I'm assuming the Coven liked to hear the fact that, yes, Claudia attempted to kill Lestat, and that makes their dislike of Louis and Claudia justified. At the same time, and we don't see the conversation between Lestat and the Coven or him arriving or anything, but I'm assuming that somewhere in there, Lestat had to admit he made Claudia, and that isn't looked well upon, as far as I can tell, in vampire society. So even though Lestat has a bigger claim of revenge because of the attempted murder, the Coven's not really that jazzed about Lestat because of probably Claudia in the first place, but also because Lestat is Lestat.
Mm-hmm.
And I maybe in the other books it'll say something. I have to assume there's some, because there's a whole book called The Vampire Armand,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got to assume that there's some past history between Lestat and the others, even if it's only minor. But yeah, so Louis visiting Armand, and he sees Lestat, and Lestat's like, okay, just bring Claudia here, and come back with me, Louis, and let's just get back on with our lives or whatever. And yeah, and again, it's hard for me to tell what exactly, aside from revenge on Claudia, perhaps, what Lestat's motivation is. If it's not, let's say, emotional, is it just that, oh my God, my bank account's empty, I need you back, my accountant? Is that kind of what it is? I mean, that seemed to be his only motivation for wanting Louis, at least at the beginning, but not necessarily later on. So anyway, Louis like acting all mature, and he's like, well, no, Lestat, you're just going to have to, I'm not going to go back with you, and just, suck it up, Buttercup. And it's then, or just after that, we have what effectively becomes the part of the movie where Santiago and the other Coven members bust into the rooms and kidnap everybody and lock Louis into a metal casket and seal him up in a wall. And Claudia and Madeline are locked in a place where the sunlight's going to fall upon them. Mm-hmm. And Louis is trapped in there for at least a night, or sorry, I should say a day. And then Armand frees him. And we have, like I say, things play out effectively the same as they did in the movie, where Louis let out. Armand's like, he kept saying, like, I couldn't have prevented this. I could not have prevented this. I could not have prevented this. And trying to ease Louis's mind that somehow, there was nothing he could do to stop Claudia from being killed and so on. Except he could have, but he didn't.
Of course. And he wanted Claudia dead.
Yeah, well, he wanted Claudia dead. The other vampires wanted Claudia dead. And of course, Claudia was the only thing tying Louis to Paris or away from him. Yeah. So of course he wanted him dead. And eventually, Lestat gets him to admit this because it's obvious that he did it intentionally. But Louis takes it kind of in stride because he's just like, I guess it was inevitable. It was just kind of, that's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess. And
well, he has this philosophical thing again that no, it is my fault because I've always been like this, and and I could have done whatever, but I didn't, and I could have, but I didn't. So his own I don't know, lack of character in a way to to confront or to do things in a different way that can maybe uncomfortable to him, where all the situations that he now regrets, so he finally understands that some of the things that had happened to him, the most painful things to him, part of them are his own fault.
Yeah, he starts taking responsibility for the situations he's put himself and the people around him into by either his indecisiveness or his selfishness or anything else. But there's also, I forgot, there's a part that there is a line in the movie, but it's more focused on here, where after he concedes to Claudia's demands and embraces Madeline, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, says something like the last part of humanity has died in me, or something like that.
Yeah.
So his own sense of self now is no longer of a compassionate, feeling human being, but of the cold, endless, immortal predator. And yeah, I guess in that way, he has sort of arrived at a far more stoic pragmatism about the events and the people that he's interacting with, and especially the instincts of vampires and so on. But still, at one point, right after, I think it was after he got out of the coffin from Armand, he confronts Lestat again, and or perhaps I'm trying to remember if it was before or after the kidnapping, but he pleads with Lestat to explain to all the others that you didn't tell us about, tell them you didn't tell us about the rules. Tell them that you left
You
us
were
uneducated.
mean to us.
Yeah, well, I mean, you didn't tell us, you didn't teach us. And so we acted in ways that offend them, but we were, it was a complete lack of knowledge and a lack of your support. And Lestat is just kind of quiet about it or whatever. And it's like, well, it's not my problem. So, yes. So Lestat still hasn't apparently learned to take responsibility for his own choices either.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Armand lets Louis out. Louis finds the Claudia and Madeline gone. Also, I got to say, and I mentioned this to you offline. This part of the book was the fastest read for me of anything else in the book, because everything was really cooking in this last couple of sections.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of fluff. There wasn't a lot of filler. There was a couple of pages here and there that kind of went on for a little bit, but otherwise everything was kind of moving, which I really appreciate, which really showed what Anne Rice can be capable of when she's not like wandering off into la la land of just let's fill up a page with words for the sake of it.
Yeah, I don't know if they task her with certain amount of pages
I know, right? It's like, well,
or words,
like, well,
because
we have a minimum word count per chapter, and so if you don't hit that word count, okay, Anne, I just read the latest draft. It needs 3 more pages, but I don't have 3 pages. Well, I need 3 more pages. Like, what am I going to do? Yeah. Have him kidnapped by an artist? I just do it. Like, okay.
Yeah, because we come from two Sundays, let's say, where we just complain about being some parts that just are useless, and this like final part is just like, it's so dynamic, it's so quick, everything like has a reason, and it's that like it's a well done thread about a story, and yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I really think that if you'd taken out all the fluff, this book could be about maybe only 2/3 the length of what it actually is, and it would still tell a really, really compelling and complete story. Something else that happens that I want to get in before we move on to the sort of the climax / conclusion. In the movie, there is that boy, that human mortal boy that is sort of the assistant / blood doll, as the Vampire the Masquerade terminology goes, of the Coven of Vampires. And in the movie, he helps Armand and Louis escape the eventual burning of the theater as their driver during the daytime. Well, in the book here, off camera, so to speak, Armand just kills the kid.
Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah, he said, Louis like, well, what about they give him a name in this, and I forget it all of a sudden. It was like Peter or Piotr or something, or maybe something else. I can't remember. Something simple. But anyway, he asked Armand about him, and Armand's just like, oh, he's dead. I killed him. It was a very, very matter of fact, just whatever. And it's just like, okay, well, was this Armand cutting ties with Paris or something else about, but at the same time, like, why? And again, well, I mean, we do get the mention of some servants and such at one point, but again, I just got to ask, where is the person who takes care of you when the sun's up? This can't be just on this side of practicality. When they were in the Carpathians and they're all by themselves, it's like, really? But even now, it's like Armand doesn't have a need or see the use of having mortal servants of some kind. It's just, why did he kill him? I guess maybe to prove to himself he wasn't getting emotionally attached, or because he was getting ready to cut ties with Paris anyway or something, or I don't know, but it's not really explained why he did it. But when he does say he did it, it's just a very sort of offhanded, yeah, I did it, whatever. Okay. Which made me kind of upset. Yeah. I thought that was a character that was going to do something else later in the series. No, he's just dead. He's just dead.
Yeah, or in this book, like, vampires trust human beings too much.
Yeah.
Because apparently it all gets resolved with, oh, I gave them a lot of money and I just told them, like, do not open this door because I am sick. Do not, disturb me until I come out. And everybody obeys. It's like
that's one of the narrative tools that Anne Rice uses in this to kind of get by a lot of stuff. It's just like her characters just have money just from nowhere or whatever. They have endless resources. Okay, there's endless resources. And secondly, if they pay somebody to do something, they do it without question. So in this case, Louis, Claudia and Madeline have been killed. Louis's been rescued by Armand, and Louis immediately goes into revenge mode, which I don't understand why the Coven wouldn't expect this as a possibility. But I suppose they just said, "Oh, great, okay, well, this guy's effective daughter we just murdered last night. Let's go to bed. Everything's fine." And so Louis, much like in the movie, he does a whole plan thing where he's going to secrete himself away in a carriage up until just the point where the sun is rising, so that he knows all the vampires in the theater are asleep or presumably already in their coffins, and then he douses the entire place with kerosene and then lights the whole thing up. But before then, like Leonora said, he rents a carriage and just pays the carriage guy $1 zillion and says, do not open this door, whatever happens, for like the next day, because he has the thing parked outside the theater, like I think during the just before daylight or just as the sun's coming up or whatever. And so he just sits in this carriage until the sun's about to come up, and then he goes and starts torching everything, and then runs out. And he does encounter Santiago, and they do have a fight. It's slightly different than the movie, where he basically bisects Santiago right down in the middle of his chest.
Yeah.
In this one, he decapitates him, and the head goes bouncing off into somewhere, which was kind of weird. But Louis notes, it's like, where are all of the ushers and the other attendants to the theater? There were like people here and things. And he asks Armand that after the fact, after the place has gone up. And Armand's like, I sent them away because I knew what you were going to do, and no reason to have you have any obstacles that didn't need to be there. And Louis like, you could have saved Claudia, couldn't you have? Really? Yeah, I could have, but I didn't. Okay. Ta-da.
Yeah.
But now, instead of like in the movie where Louis effectively just dumps Armand, we get a decidedly hand-waved description of the two of them now going off to all of the places that are described in the movie as to where Louis and Claudia went. Because in the movie, if you notice, there's a point right after the fire in New Orleans where they sort of do a sort of visual montage of all the places that Louis and Claudia went together before they ended up in Paris, because they have Claudia drawing pictures of like Egypt and all these other distant locations across the world before they arrive in Paris. And instead now it's Armand and Louis who are traveling the world for the next 100 years or whatever.
Honeymoon.
Basically a honeymoon. And it's never brought up, at least at that point, if Louis burned down the theater, was Lestat in there? He didn't seem to care. He just went in there and just set the whole thing afire. Didn't even have a thought about Lestat still being there. But
yeah, well, actually, there's a part in the book that he says, if someone survived, I don't care. If everybody is dead, I don't care. I just want to do that because it was my tantrum, because they killed Claudia. And now I am gone.
Yes. So Louis and Armand travel the world, just doing things and stuff and things and being vampires. And then we effectively arrive in the present, back in New Orleans. But then we get to part 4. And part 4 is the big wrap up. And Louis is like, yeah, that's the story. And the interviewer's like, that can't be it. I mean, there's got to be more to it than that. And the guy's like, no, that's all I have to say.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. But he does talk about having come back to New Orleans with Armand, and having come back to New Orleans for the first time in however long it was since he left from the fire, seeing the city, and even though a lot has changed, a lot is still the same. Some of the same buildings are still there, or some of the architecture is very familiar. And
he comes back because when they from Europe they return to New York, and they stay in New York for a while, and it's only when Armand tells him that Lestat is not dead.
Right.
That is when he wants to go back to New Orleans.
Right. And he seeks out the old house.
Yes.
And eventually finds, well, actually, first he notices a new vampire in town. And he follows this vampire. And we're never given a name of this vampire. Just that apparently he's relatively young and obviously a little brash and impolite, I guess we could call it. But he eventually tracks this vampire down to his origin, and it's to this old house. And of course, therein is the crusty and aged Lestat, who, as far as Louis can tell, might not have left that house in years and years and years or something. And we come across Lestat after his, let's say, his pupil has murdered a woman and kidnapped her baby to take to Lestat. And I'm like, okay, I know this is a horror book. I realize they're vampires and everything, but really, baby blood? That's where we're at? We're going to kidnap Lestat is a baby eater now? What?
Baby blood is the best blood.
I guess so. I mean, it's the freshest. Anyway, Louis observes this guy slaughter a lady and kidnap her baby and take the baby back to this house. And there's, Lestat needs his baby back ribs. And so he's sitting in front of a fireplace looking all old and crusty. And the other guy's looking all, smarmy and everything. And Louis like, hey, Lestat, what's up? And Lestat's like, oh, Louis, you came back. And of course, Pupil is all jealous because everybody's in a love triangle all the goddamn time. And he has this long conversation with Lestat about, they just reminisce or something. And Lestat's like, yes, well, you've come back to me, Louis. Finally, you've come back to me. And, I can go out again and da-da-da. And he's like, no, Lestat.
No.
I got past our differences a long, long time ago. But, that's just the longest I'd live. No, you're, I'm so over you, dude. I'm so over you. And so you just, enjoy your unlife or whatever. And Lestat's like,
baby.
No, Louis. And then Louis does return the baby back to the place where its mother was murdered, just because. But that also makes me believe that for some undetermined amount of time, Lestat has murdered several babies up to this point. So yay, I guess. And then Armand and Louis have this sort of like final breakup session on the banks of the river, where they reminisce about what's going on and who are you and who am I and what's life and what's existence, and I've gotten past this and da 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 da. And Armand just kind of wanders off, and Louis just knows I'm probably not going to see him again. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. And then we get to what is effectively the end of the movie, where the interviewer's guy is like, well, I can be your companion. I can be your connection to this era and this age, and you're looking for someone to go along with you. And
I'm in love with you.
I mean, Louis, I've fallen in love with you. And Louis like, oh, for crying out loud. And the same thing happens. In this case, he doesn't grab the guy up by his neck and say, is this what you want? He grabs him up by his lapels or something and holds him against the wall and says, do you think you find us magical and mystical? Is this what you want? And like, no. And he drops him and disappears. And instead of immediately running out of the room like a maniac or something, the interviewer kind of passes out. He wakes up the next morning, and the sun's coming through the window, and he's like, was that a dream? And he hits his tape player, and he plays back part of the tape, and hears Louis' voice like, no. And then he's like, wait a second. And he rewinds the tape a little bit, and he goes back to the part where Louis was describing finding Lestat, and specifically what part of town he went to find Lestat, and describing the house that Lestat was in, because there's so much detail in these things. And the interviewer is like, I know where I'm going. And the book ends. I'm like, it's like, that's a much better ending than the movie.
Yeah.
And yes, and so we're left in sort of a quasi cliffhanger where our interviewer is going off to hunt down Lestat and say, hey, I know Louis. Make me a vampire and I'll help you out of this house.
Yeah.
Or something. And as far as I know, at some point in the book series, I don't know when, we do meet the interviewer again, and we do actually are given a name for him. I'm not looking for any spoilers from anybody, but that I just remember that little factoid from at some point in the past. But yeah, so that is the end of Interview with the Vampire. Any thoughts that I didn't cover there, or anything else that came to mind while you read it?
No, I think you did a pretty good job.
So overall, what did we think of the book?
I really liked it. I enjoy it. The the parts that were unnecessary were really unnecessary. To the point that it upset me a little bit because because it's just like waste of time, and it just like dilutes the story.
Yes.
If you know what I mean. So
it slows everything down. It's like you're cooking along at a fairly good pace on things, and all of a sudden you have to stop to get through 7 pages of like nonsense and unrelated things just to get back to center again and move on with what's going on in the story.
Yeah, I would love to know what was she thinking. Like if that was a part that she was, like she thought she would she was going to like give some more interest in the future, and then she forgot about it and just didn't, or I don't know, but there are parts that are really unnecessary, but the story is good. I like the story. It's curious how you when you reread something, especially when the first time you read it you were like young, and now you read with a different like mind. You see this character Louis like a like a tortured soul and whatever, and now you just see him most of the time like a whiny person.
Yeah.
But
the angsty teenager mindset versus these some more cynical and grown up mature mindset of like, shut up.
Exactly.
Shut up, you whiner. Like, geez, like you're like, oh, I totally identify with Louis. The whole world's against him, and he's just trying to understand himself. And now you're like, you baby, just go get a bottle. Suck on a bottle or something. You don't need to suck on somebody's neck. Just geez, yeah, it's kind of like that.
But still, I mean, it's a really good book, and yeah, I like we said a couple of times in the past. The movie lacks of some things that could have been important, but because of the time that you need to tell a story, it probably was impossible. But yeah.
I would have liked so between the book and Anne Rice having done the screenplay for the movie and seeing the compromises and or streamlining of things that she made for the movie, which in some cases were much better ideas and much better decisions. I honestly would have preferred it if she had lived long enough, if she had written screenplays for a limited TV series covering the book, because I think then you probably would have had. And I realized that there is a TV series out now on AMC, but obviously Anne Rice did not read it. She did not write it. And from everything I've heard, it's meh. So I don't have any particular motivation to want to see it right now. But yeah, I think if she'd had, and especially after having written the other books in the series, if she'd written a set of screenplays for a TV series today, it would probably be the ultimate version of the story, at least as far as telling it in its most pure and concise manner. But yeah, except for some speed bumps here and there with the narrative and some mysteries left unsolved, I suppose. Like I'm still stuck on the zombie vampires. I'm still stuck on the revenants. I want a whole book just on the revenants. Yeah, it's just also like, okay, this is the one interesting out of everything else, and the one anomalous thing that is still a mystery is the whole revenants. So I hope that they go over that some more in some of the later books. But yeah, so now the question is, do you own a copy of The Vampire Lestat, Leonora?
I do.
Okay, well, I do too now, of course. So if we are up to it, do we want to take a break next week, or do we want to just keep barreling through?
Let's do this.
Okay. So everyone, that will conclude, for the moment, I'll get to the chat in a second, don't worry. That'll conclude our overall review of Interview with the Vampire. So starting next Sunday, barring anything that might throw it off, we will start the first, I don't know if Vampire Lestat has sections or chapters, but let's just do a second verse, same as the first. Let's do the first 5 chapter/sections of the Vampire Lestat. And we'll set that as our goal for next week. But now, if you guys have anything you'd like to add before we wrap up. Urquelita Stefano, so do Anne Rice vampires get more powerful with age? It seems that way with other stories. The oldest one is always the most powerful. That seems to be the implication, as well as in the Anne Rice universe, that the older you get, the more difficult it would be for a younger vampire to take you down all by themselves. It's not I think it's greatly implied that that's the case, that Armand could probably take on all the other vampires by himself, kind of thing, but we don't yet see that happen or have much more lore provided on that. There's also the implication that Armand possesses emotional/psychological powers that other vampires don't, because he's able to sort of entrance those around him and also kind of read minds, although we don't get too deeply into that at different times. So yeah. And of course, there's also the implication that what's his name? Santiago has some low-level psychic ability, because I think when he first meets Louis and he's matching Louis's movements exactly in time, I read that as him having a very sort of low-level telepathy where he could sort of like tell what Louis's next move was going to be, which made it interesting when they fought at the end that Santiago got caught by the scythe the way that he did. But who knows? Maybe I'm just reading into it too much. Hard to say. Black Romeo, it's funny. Interview with a Vampire was the first novel I read. My English teacher was determined to have me read something. She searched for books, but none gripped me. Interview sucked me right in. Well, I don't know what my first novel was. I mean, like actual like adult, not like some kind of kiddie thing like Indian in the Cupboard or something, or The Great Brain. It was probably The Stand. I think I seem to recall Stephen King's The Stand being the first like real book I ever attempted. So yeah, horror and the darker side of things have always been a little part of my. Do you remember what your first novel was?
Lord of the Rings.
Aha! Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew you were a Tolkien fan.
Well, I remember that I had to like read the Hobbit, like for, like a school assignment or whatever. But this one, the Lord of the Rings in particular, I remember that our teacher let us choose, like, if we wanted to read Treasure Island or the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Treasure Island.
And I was like, hell no, I'm not going to read Treasure Island. So I'm sorry. So I chose Lord of the Rings, but obviously that's totally different, like, like lengths in books.
Different genre, different complexities. It's a whole other world, yeah.
And I was like, oh, what did I do?
Yeah, what have I done? This is a history book. This isn't a novel.
Yeah, but I have to say that I enjoyed a lot, and I read it like super quick. Like I think it, like 1 week or something, like a weekend or whatever. Yeah, because I loved it. But I have not touched anything about Tolkien. since then. So
All right.
I like it, but I don't know. I mean, it's not a genre that I like, like go for looking.
Yeah, I've never really been into high fantasy, and I've never read a single Tolkien book. I never have. Like the first high fantasy novel that I ever remember reading, and I still have a copy now. It's called "Where the Evil Dwells" by I want to say it's Clifford Simak, and it's probably one of the most. I'm sure it's probably considered one of the most generic fantasy stories ever. It's set quasi in real history because they talk a lot about like the Roman legions and things, but it's got wizards and dragons and evil, saving the princess from the castle kind of thing. Although it's all done very, very maturely. It's not a sort of flight of fancy. And yeah, I had to read that. I had a class in high school called sci-fi literature. And we had this list of books that we could choose from for every section of the class or whatever, but you had to go back and forth between fantasy and sci-fi during the course of the class. And so I remember I read Where the Evil Dwells for fantasy and The Black Trillium for fantasy, which was, I think, God, I suddenly forget her name, the author. She's a very well-known fantasy author. And then for sci-fi, I read We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, which is basically the Russian version of 1984, more or less. And then the other one was Dark Over Landfall, which is apparently a prequel to some sci-fi series of like a colony ship that lands on a planet and everybody's stranded there and has to make do and that kind of thing. But anyway, going off into a long tangent. Anything else from those of you in the chat? Also some other hellos. Poker Pierce, hello. Random American, hello. I saw Ebony Williams earlier. Hello. Lil Meow, hello. Anybody else that I missed here before we wrap things up? Anything else anybody else wants to say about the deal before we go? A lot of people talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the chat. Wasn't that with Arthur's Daughter? I never read that. With the Black Trillium? Or am I don't know. I remember very, very little about that book except the title at this point. So, but anyway, everybody, we're going to wrap it up here. We're about almost an hour in, which is a little bit longer than usual, but that's fine. Yeah, so next Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, or thereabouts, given technical possibilities, we'll be starting The Vampire Lestat. The first 5, whichever it is, sections or chapters, whichever they have. And looking forward to that. Other programming notes. Thursday, as always, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, will be the next TED Excellence. And as I've stated before, I've got two different true crime content creators I'm in contact with trying to arrange the next episode. So it's coming soon, but soon is relative, like your mother. So just wait, it'll happen eventually. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this little outing. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other comments about the book or anything else about this series so far, let us know in the comments below. If you're listening to this in the future, leave a like on the way out if you would, or a dislike. Either way, I appreciate the engagement. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated or shared out the fundraisers at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Really do appreciate it. Anything else, Leonora?
Nope. See you next Sunday.
Yep, everybody. Have a good rest of the Sunday. Have a good rest of the week ahead. And I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And we will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.